The night was silent, and the ruins of an ancient world lay hidden under the earth. Deep inside those ruins, there was something strange, something not many would believe. It was not a grave, not a temple, but a glass tomb, glowing faintly in the darkness, and inside that tomb a woman was trapped. Her body looked still, but her chest rose slowly. She was alive. Her face was pale, her eyes closed, her hands pressed against the cold glass. She had been there for years, maybe centuries, nobody knew. But she was not sleeping. She was waiting. This woman was not like humans. She belonged to another race, a race that once ruled these lands. They were strong, proud, and cruel in their judgments. They demanded perfection from everyone, and when one failed, they punished without mercy. She had failed them. Her failure was not in battle, not in wisdom, not in loyalty. It was something more personal, more painful. She could not give birth. She could not carry a child. And for that, she was declared useless. For that, she was buried alive in the glass tomb. Her mind remembered the day clearly. The voices of her own people echoed in her head. "You are broken. You are unworthy. You are a shame to us." They did not kill her because killing would have been a mercy. Instead, they locked her in this prison, a coffin of glass, a place where she would stay alive but never live. Every day she opened her eyes only to see the same cold glass. She pressed her hand against it, but no one touched her back. She cried, but her tears dried before anyone saw them. She screamed, but the glass carried no sound outside. She felt hunger, but never food. She felt time, but it moved like endless chains around her. The tomb was like a mirror of her pain. Her beauty remained. Her body did not grow old, but her soul grew heavier each day. The only thing that lived inside her was sorrow. Still, she refused to let her hope die. Somewhere in her heart, she prayed, "Maybe one day someone will find me. Maybe one day someone will free me." But the years stretched on, and her hope grew weaker. Sometimes she closed her eyes and wished she could simply stop breathing, but the tomb would not let her die. It was a cruel machine, designed to keep her alive forever. Above the ground, the world had changed. Her people were gone. Their pride destroyed, their cities lost to time. But she remained the only survivor of a forgotten punishment, a secret waiting to be discovered. One night, the silence was broken. A faint vibration shook the ground above her. She opened her eyes quickly, her heart beating faster than it had in years. At first, she thought it was only her imagination, but then she heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking above the ruins. The sound was faint, but to her it was thunder. Her lips trembled, her fingers pressed harder against the glass. Was it real? Or was her lonely mind creating voices again? The footsteps grew louder. Dust fell from the cracks above, and then light, real light, broke through the darkness. Her eyes, unused to brightness, blinked fast. She saw a shadow, a figure moving closer. Her heart screamed inside her chest. "Someone is here. Someone has found me." For a moment, fear fought against hope. What if it was one of her kind? What if they came back only to laugh at her again? What if they sealed her tomb even deeper, this time forever? The shadow stopped in front of the glass. It was not her kind. It was different. The face, the shape, the clothes. It was a human. The woman pressed her hand to the glass, her lips whispering words he could not hear. Her eyes begged, her tears shone. The human leaned closer, his eyes wide with shock. He had never seen anything like this before. A living woman trapped inside a glass coffin deep in the earth. It was impossible, but it was real. The silence between them was heavy. She feared he would run away, leave her behind. But he stayed, his hand rising slowly to touch the glass from the other side. For the first time in centuries, she felt something. Not freedom yet, not escape, but the promise of being seen, not as broken, not as useless, but as alive. The glass tomb glowed faintly under his touch, and the woman's heart whispered, "Maybe this is the one. Maybe my waiting has ended." The ruins around them stood still. The night air grew colder. But inside the glass, a fire of hope had been lit once again. The glass tomb stood like a silent witness to centuries of pain. Dust covered the ruins above. Plants grew wild, stones cracked, but the tomb never broke. It was built to last forever, and so it had. Inside, the woman waited, breathing slowly, carrying the weight of her punishment. She was once proud, once beautiful beyond measure. A daughter of a race that demanded perfection. They lived long lives, strong and powerful, yet their hearts were cold. They believed every life had a purpose, and every purpose must serve their future. To them, a woman's greatest gift was to give life to carry children that would continue their legacy. But she could not. Her body refused to give them what they wanted. And for that, they judged her useless. Her memories were sharp like broken glass, cutting her mind again and again. She remembered the council of elders, their golden robes shining, their voices loud with anger. "You are a failure," one said. "You will bring shame to us." Another spat. "We will not waste food or time on one who cannot give us children," said a third. Her heart broke with every word. She begged, she cried, she fell to her knees. But mercy was not in their nature. They carried her to the tomb, not to kill, but to bury her alive. It was their cruel tradition. For them, death was easy, but living without love, without freedom, without family, that was punishment. So they sealed her inside, locking her in glass, where she would not age, not starve, not die. Her crime was not murder, not betrayal, but simply being unable to create life. The years turned into decades, and the decades turned into centuries. She lost count of time. At first she screamed. Her fists hitting the glass, her voice echoed back to her, but the world outside stayed silent. Later, she cried, rivers of tears sliding down her face. But no one came to wipe them away. And when her tears dried, she sat still, her eyes empty, her soul heavy with silence. She spoke to herself, to the shadows, to the tomb. "Why am I still alive?" she whispered. "What did I do to deserve this?" Her voice grew weaker with each passing year, until sometimes she forgot what words sounded like. Loneliness wrapped around her like a second skin. The tomb became her only companion. She studied the cracks on the glass, the faint glow inside. She traced shapes with her fingers, pretending she was drawing pictures for a child who would never exist. She closed her eyes and imagined holding a baby, rocking it to sleep. She even gave names to children she would never have. It was the only way to survive the endless darkness, but even her imagination could not hide the truth forever. Every time she opened her eyes and saw the same glass, the same prison, the hope inside her cracked a little more. She wondered if her people ever remembered her, but deep down she knew the answer. They had forgotten her. She was not a person to them, just a shame erased from their history. Yet the tomb refused to let her die. It was built with strange power, ancient and cruel. Her body stayed young, her skin smooth, her eyes bright, but her soul aged, heavy like stone. She carried centuries of pain in a heart that only wanted love. Then, one day the silence changed. The sound of footsteps, real footsteps, broke through her prison. At first she thought it was only her mind playing tricks again. Many times before she had imagined voices, imagined rescue, imagined freedom. And every time she woke to the same glass, but this time it was different. The sound was clear, heavy, strong. Dust fell from the cracks above, and then light. A light brighter than she had seen in centuries broke through. Her eyes widened, her heart raced. She pressed her hand to the glass. Her lips moved, whispering words she had forgotten how to speak. When the shadow appeared, she trembled. She expected the cruel faces of her kind, the ones who cursed her long ago. But it was not them, it was someone else, a stranger, a different shape, different eyes. It was a human. The woman's heart skipped. She had heard of humans long ago, weak creatures her people never respected. But here one stood, alive, curious, staring at her through the glass. And in his eyes, She did not see hatred. She did not see judgment. She saw shock. She saw wonder. She saw pity. Her hand pressed harder against the glass. The human raised his own hand, touching the surface from the other side. For centuries she had been forgotten, abandoned, left to rot in silence. But in that single moment, in the simple act of being seen, she felt something stir inside her. Something she thought was dead. Hope. The forgotten prisoner was no longer unseen. The tomb was still strong, the glass still cold, but her heart whispered a new prayer. Please, do not leave me. The ruins were silent except for the sound of boots crushing old stone. The human man walked slowly, holding a small lamp in his hand. He was an explorer, not a soldier, not a king, only a man searching for forgotten things. He never expected to find life in the ruins of a dead world. But now, his breath caught in his chest as he stared at the glowing tomb. At first he thought it was only a statue, a trick of glass and stone. But then he saw her chest rise, slow and gentle. He saw the faint shimmer of her tears pressed against the inside of the glass, and he knew she was alive. His hands trembled as he moved closer. Who was she? How could someone still live here, in this grave of history? His heart raced with fear and wonder. He pressed his palm against the glass. It was warm, faintly pulsing with strange energy, and on the other side, her hand moved to meet his. The woman's eyes opened wider, glowing with desperate hope. For centuries, no one had answered her silent cries. But now, here stood a human, different from her kind, yet alive, breathing, real. Her lips trembled. She whispered words, but he could not hear them. The tomb swallowed her voice. Still he could see it in her eyes. She was begging. The man's heart tightened. He could not hear her, but he felt her pain. There was something in her gaze, something older than time. Loneliness so deep it made his chest ache. He whispered softly, though he knew she could not hear. It's okay. I see you. The woman's tears shone brighter, her fingers shaking against the glass. For the first time in centuries, she was not invisible, not forgotten, not erased. She was seen, but fear clawed at her heart. What if he left? What if he looked at her the way her people once did, with disgust, with rejection? What if he walked away, leaving her trapped again forever? She pressed her forehead to the glass, shaking her head, silently pleading. Her eyes begged him not to turn back, not to abandon her like all the others. The man stayed. He studied the tomb, his mind racing. It was not just a prison, it was something else. The glass had symbols etched across it, glowing faintly under the light. Strange marks that pulsed like veins. Alive. It was a machine of some kind, ancient and powerful. A machine made to keep her alive. He touched one of the markings. The glow spread across the surface, and the woman gasped inside. The tomb responded to his touch, like it had been waiting for him. She pressed both hands against the glass now, her eyes, wide with hope and fear. Her lips formed one word over and over. Please, please, please. The man's breath shook. He knew he should be careful. He did not know what she was. She might be dangerous, she might be cursed. But when he looked into her eyes, all he saw was sorrow. Not hatred, not malice, only sorrow. A sorrow too human to ignore. He stepped back for a moment, staring at the glass tomb. Part of him wanted to leave, to pretend he had never seen her. But his heart refused. He remembered his own daughter waiting at home, her smile, her laughter. He remembered the nights she cried, missing the mother she lost. And in this woman's eyes, he saw the same emptiness, the same ache for love. How could he walk away from that? The woman saw him hesitate. Her body shook with fear. She thought he was leaving. No, she mouthed desperately, slamming her fists weakly against the glass. Her tears streamed down. She had survived centuries of silence, but she could not survive hope being broken again. Not now, not after seeing freedom so close. The man's jaw tightened, his hand clenched into a fist. No, he whispered to himself. I will not leave her here. He raised the lamp higher, studying the edges of the tomb. There had to be a way to open it, to break it. Even if the tomb fought back, even if it was dangerous, he could not abandon her. The woman watched him move around the glass. Her heart pounded, her breaths came fast. She did not understand his words, but she understood his actions. He was trying, he was fighting for her, something no one had ever done before. For a moment she closed her eyes and let herself believe. Maybe fate had not forgotten her. Maybe this human was the answer to her silent prayers. Her palms pressed flat to the glass, her forehead resting against it. She whispered softly, "Please save me." The man placed both hands on the tomb. The glass trembled, the glow flickered, something deep inside the ruins stirred, as if the tomb itself resisted. But he did not step back. His voice was steady, quiet but full of resolve. "You're not staying here." The woman's heart surged with new life. For the first time, the forgotten prisoner believed she might not be forgotten anymore. The human's fingers traced the strange symbols carved into the tomb. The glowing marks seemed alive, like veins of light running across the glass. He pressed his hand harder, and the lines pulsed as if recognizing him. The woman inside gasped, her palms flat against the glass, her eyes begging. Every part of her soul cried for freedom. The man's heart pounded. He had no map, no knowledge of this strange prison, but something inside told him, if he left her here, he would never forgive himself. He whispered softly, though she could not hear, "Don't give up. I will get you out." The tomb resisted him. When he pressed one symbol, the glow flared brighter, and the ground shook slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling. The woman's body trembled. Her lips formed silent words, warning him. The tomb was dangerous. It was built not just to hold her, but to fight anyone who dared to open it. Still, the man did not stop. He slammed his fist against the glass, but it did not break. He struck it again, his knuckles bleeding. The woman shook her head, desperately, pointing at the glowing symbols. Her gestures told him the tomb had a secret, a key, not brute force, but something else. He studied the marks again, his breath uneven. One symbol looked different, darker, more cracked than the rest. He touched it, and the entire tomb shivered. The glow flickered weakly, and for the first time, the glass felt less solid. The woman's eyes widened, her hope returning. She pressed her hands over the same spot from inside, 2 hands, one inside, one outside, meeting through the barrier. The man pushed with all his strength. The tomb screamed. With a strange sound, sharp and painful, light burst from the cracks, shooting across the ruins. The woman closed her eyes, her body shaking as if the tomb itself fought to hold her. Then, with a thunderous crack, the glass split. Shards fell like frozen rain, glowing for a moment before turning to dust. The barrier that had trapped her for centuries shattered into nothing. She stumbled forward, collapsing into his arms. Her body was weak, so light it felt like she might vanish if he let go. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow. Yet she was alive. Truly alive outside the prison for the first time in centuries. The man dropped to his knees, holding her gently. Her head rested against his chest, her hands clutching his coat. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. She could not speak his language, but she whispered one word anyway. "Free." The man's throat tightened. He wrapped his coat around her fragile body, shielding her from the cold air. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're not going back in there." The ruins groaned around them as if angry. The tomb's power had been broken, and the old structure did not like it. Rocks cracked, dust rained from above. The man knew they had to escape quickly, or the ruins might bury them both. He lifted her into his arms. Surprised by how light she was, she clung to him weakly, her face hidden against his shoulder. Every step he took, she whispered the same word again and again. "Free. Free." Her voice was like a child learning to speak for the first time, fragile but full of wonder. The man's mind raced as he carried her out. Who was she? Why was she locked away? What kind of people could punish someone so cruelly for something so small? His heart burned with anger at the thought of anyone doing this to his own daughter. No one deserved such a prison. As they reached the surface, the night air hit her face. She gasped, her eyes wide as she saw the stars above. For centuries she had seen only darkness and glass. Now the sky stretched open, endless and free. Her lips trembled and tears rolled down her cheeks again. She raised one weak hand, pointing at the stars, whispering, "Beautiful." The man stopped, staring at her expression. In that moment he realized how much she had lost, how much time had been stolen from her. She was like a child seeing the world for the first time. And yet, there was wisdom in her eyes too. A sadness, deeper than words could describe. He lowered her gently onto the grass, letting her feel the earth beneath her hands. She gripped the soil tightly as if afraid it would vanish. She pressed her face to the ground, whispering something he could not understand. But he knew. She was thanking the world for letting her touch it again. The man knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he said, though she could not understand. Still, when she looked up at him, her eyes seemed to understand enough. For the first time, she smiled. A weak, trembling smile, but real, behind them. The ruins rumbled, the tomb collapsing into itself. The glass was gone, the prison destroyed, there was no going back. Her past was buried forever, her future, uncertain but alive, stood beside the human who had saved her. She reached for his hand. Her fingers shook, her voice broke. But she whispered, again free. And in that single word, centuries of silence, pain, and loneliness dissolved into the night. The night was quiet after the ruins collapsed. The man carried the fragile woman through the forest, the stars lighting their path. Her head rested against his shoulder, her eyes half closed, her lips whispering the same word again and again. Free, he tightened his hold on her as if promising she would never return to that prison. When they reached his small home at the edge of the forest, the woman stirred weakly. The warmth of the fire inside touched her skin, and she gasped softly. For centuries she had felt only the cold air of her tomb. Now the firelight flickered on her face, filling her eyes with wonder. She stretched her fingers toward the flame as if afraid it might disappear. The man smiled faintly, placing a blanket over her shoulders. "You're safe here," he said, though she could not understand his words. The woman sat near the fire, silent, her gaze never leaving the dancing flames. Her body was weak, but her mind was awake, alive. Every small thing, the wooden floor, the smell of bread, the sound of crackling fire, felt like a miracle to her. She touched the table, the chair, the cup of water he gave her, as if each one was treasure. Her eyes glistened with tears at simple things he had always taken for granted. At first she was afraid to eat. Her trembling hands lifted the bread slowly. She sniffed it like a cautious child. Then she took a bite and her eyes widened. The taste, so soft and warm, made her close her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. To him it was only bread, but to her, it was life itself. He watched, quietly, realizing just how deep her suffering had been. That night she could not sleep. She sat near the window staring at the stars. Her hand rested over her chest, as if trying to feel the rhythm of her own heart. The man walked over, placing a blanket gently around her shoulders again. She turned, her eyes meeting his. For a long moment, no words were spoken. But in her gaze, there was something new. Trust. Weak, fragile, but growing. In the days that followed, their bond grew slowly. She could not speak his language, and he could not speak hers. But small gestures built a bridge between them. When she pointed at water, he gave her a cup. When she touched her stomach, he brought her food. When she shivered, he wrapped her in another blanket. Each small act became a thread, weaving connection. One morning she tried to stand. Her legs were weak, unused for centuries, and she nearly fell. The man rushed to her side, catching her before she touched the ground. Her fingers clutched his arm tightly, her breath fast. For a moment she leaned against him, her eyes trembling with fear of falling. Then slowly, she looked up at him and smiled. A small, brave smile. That was the first time he saw her not as a prisoner, not as a victim but as someone fighting to live again. The man began showing her simple things: how to light a candle, how to pour water into a cup. She watched every action carefully, copying with delicate hands. Every time she succeeded, she laughed softly, a sound so gentle, so pure that it warmed the entire room. The man found himself smiling too. Her laughter was rare, but when it came, it was like sunlight after endless rain. At night, when the fire burned low, she sometimes woke crying. Old memories haunted her, the voices of her people calling her worthless, broken, unfit. She pressed her hands to her ears, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no." The man would sit beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He said nothing, only stayed until her breathing calmed. She did not understand his words, but she understood his presence. For the first time in centuries, she was not alone in her pain. The bond between them deepened. It was not the bond of blood, nor of language. It was the bond of two souls, one broken, one willing to heal. She began to watch him differently. Every time he fixed the roof, chopped wood, or cooked food, she studied his face. Her eyes softened, her lips curved into faint smiles. In her silence, she carried gratitude too deep for words. One evening, as they sat near the fire, she pointed at him, then placed her hand over her heart. Her gesture was simple, yet powerful. She was saying, "He lived in her heart." The man blinked, his throat tightening. He pointed back at her, then did the same. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a smile that carried both sadness and hope. The bond was fragile, but it was real. For centuries, she had been called useless, unworthy of love. But here, in the small home of a simple human, she was, learning she had value, not as a tool, not as a vessel, but as a person. And with each passing day, the cracks in her heart slowly began to heal. Days passed in quiet rhythm. The woman was learning life again, step by step, smile by smile. The human man cared for her with patience, never rushing, never demanding. Their bond grew stronger, but something was still missing, something neither of them could see yet. One morning, the door to the small home creaked open. A soft laugh echoed through the room. The man's daughter ran inside, her little feet tapping the floor. She had been away with relatives, but now she returned, her arms full of flowers. "Papa," she called, rushing to him with bright eyes. Her laughter filled the air like music. The woman froze. Her body stiffened as she saw the child. Her heart pounded with both wonder and fear. She had never held a child, never been called mother. Her people had buried her for this very reason. Yet now before her stood a small girl, smiling without fear. The man lifted his daughter and spun her around. The child giggled, then noticed the stranger sitting quietly by the fire. Her eyes widened, curious but not afraid. "Papa, who is she?" the girl asked, tilting her head. The man hesitated, glancing at the woman. He whispered softly, "She is someone who needed us." The girl's gaze lingered on the woman. Her innocence saw no brokenness, no failure. She only saw a woman with gentle eyes and trembling hands. Slowly, the child walked closer, her tiny feet padding across the floor. The woman looked down, afraid to meet her gaze. Her hands twisted the edge of her blanket nervously, but the child stopped in front of her and smiled. "Hello," the girl said softly. "My name is Lyra." The woman's lips parted. Her voice stuck in her throat. No words came, only tears. Her eyes burned as she stared at the small child. The child tilted her head again, then reached out. Her tiny hand touched the woman's fingers, warm and trusting. The woman gasped, her whole body trembling at the simple touch. It was something she had dreamed of for centuries. A child's hand in hers. The girl giggled softly. "You're cold," she said, wrapping both her hands around the woman's. The woman broke down, her tears spilling freely. Her body shook as silent sobs escaped her chest. The man stepped forward, worried, but stopped when he saw the child climb onto the woman's lap. Without fear, without hesitation, the girl hugged her. You don't have to be sad, Lyra whispered. You can stay with us. The woman's arms trembled as she lifted them slowly. She held the girl close, pressing her face against the child's hair. For the first time, she felt something her people said she would never feel. She felt like a mother. From that moment, the bond between them grew quickly. The girl followed the woman everywhere, holding her hand. She showed her how to braid flowers into crowns, how to skip stones in the river. The woman listened carefully, smiling at the girl's laughter. Every small thing was new to her: laughter at spilled water, joy at chasing butterflies. Her heart soaked in every sound, every touch, every moment. At night, when the girl asked for a bedtime story, the woman hesitated. Her voice was weak, but she tried. She hummed softly, an old melody from her forgotten world. The girl's eyes grew heavy, her head resting on the woman's lap, and before she knew it, the child whispered, "Good night, Mama." The word pierced the woman's heart like light breaking through darkness. "Mama," she whispered back, her tears falling onto the girl's hair. The man stood in the doorway, his chest tight. He knew what that word meant. She had been denied motherhood all her life, but now, his daughter had given her the gift no one else would. A child's love. From then on, the girl called her Mama every day. The woman never corrected her, never pushed her away. Each time she heard it, her heart grew stronger. The emptiness that once defined her began to fill, not with blood, not with birth, but with love. Love pure and unconditional. The villagers who saw them whispered among themselves, "Who was this strange woman living with the man and his daughter?" Some said she was cursed, others said she was a blessing, but the child never cared. To her, the woman was simply Mama, and to the woman, the child was everything she had prayed for in her silent tomb. One evening, as the sun set in golden light, the girl placed a flower crown on the woman's head. "You look beautiful, Mama," she said proudly. The woman laughed softly, touching the crown with trembling fingers. Her smile was bright, her eyes full of tears. For the first time in centuries, her heart whispered not of pain, but of joy. The bond between the three was not written in blood. It was written in love, trust, and kindness. The woman had been punished for being unable to give birth, yet fate had given her something far greater: a daughter who chose her and a man who saved her. And in that little home, with laughter and warmth surrounding her, she no longer felt like the forgotten prisoner. She felt like a mother, a real mother. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. The small home at the edge of the forest no longer felt silent or lonely. It was filled with laughter, with footsteps running across the wooden floor, with the soft voice of a child calling, "Papa," and "Mama." And in those sounds, the woman discovered a new life. She had once believed she was cursed, broken, unworthy. Her people had buried her alive, sealing her in glass because she could not give birth. But here, in this simple house, she learned a truth far greater than her people's cruel laws. Motherhood was not only about blood, it was about love. The little girl clung to her every day. "Mama, come play. Mama, look at my drawing. Mama, sing to me." Each time the word left the child's lips, the woman's heart grew lighter. Each time she answered with a smile or a hug. The chains of her past grew weaker. The man watched silently, his heart full. He had brought the woman into his home out of compassion. But now, he saw her as family. Not a stranger, not a guest, but part of them. Her hands, once trembling and unsure, now held strength when she braided the child's hair. Her eyes, once full of tears, now sparkled when the girl laughed. The woman was changing. She was no longer a prisoner. She was a mother. One evening, the family sat outside, watching the sunset paint the sky. The girl leaned against the woman, her head resting on her lap. The man sat beside them, quietly smiling. The woman looked at the horizon, the colors burning gold and red. Her lips trembled, and she whispered softly, "I am alive." The man turned to her, nodding. "Yes, you are," he said. But to her, those words meant more than he could imagine. For centuries, she had lived without truly living. Now every breath felt like a gift. Every smile, every touch, every laugh of the child was proof that she had been reborn. That night, she dreamed of her past. She saw the faces of her people, their cold eyes, their cruel voices. "You are nothing," they said. "You are broken." But when she opened her eyes, she saw the sleeping child curled in her arms, the girl's tiny hand resting over her heart, and the voices of the past faded away. For the first time, the woman's heart answered back, "No, I am not broken. I am loved." In the days that followed, the woman grew stronger. She learned to cook with the man, laughing when the bread burned. She learned to wash clothes by the river, playing with the child as they splashed water. She even sang softly while the girl spun around in circles, wearing crowns of flowers. Every small task, every small moment became a celebration of life. The villagers who once whispered now began to smile when they saw her. They saw how the child adored her, how the man trusted her. They saw how her eyes shone with warmth instead of sorrow. Slowly their doubts faded. The woman was no longer the strange outsider. She was part of a family, and the family made her whole. One day, the girl brought her a drawing. It was simple, drawn with childish hands. 3 figures stood together, holding hands under the sun. "Papa, Mama, and me," the girl said proudly. The woman's hands shook as she held the picture. Her tears fell. But this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of joy. The man placed a hand on her shoulder. "She chose you," he said softly. "And so did I." The woman looked at him, her lips trembling. Her past told her she was unworthy, but the present told her she was loved. She nodded slowly, whispering the word that had become her truth. Family. That night, as the fire burned low, she sat with the child asleep in her lap. The man rested nearby, his eyes calm. The woman looked around the room, feeling the warmth of home. She remembered the glass tomb, the endless silence, the loneliness that had once been her only companion. But now, that memory felt distant, like a nightmare she had finally woken from. She stroked the child's hair gently, whispering softly, "You saved me." For though it was the man who broke her tomb, it was the girl who gave her a reason to live. A child's love had healed the wound no one else could. The woman leaned back, her eyes closing with peace. For centuries, she had been told she was nothing. But now in this little home, in the arms of a child and beside a man who saw her worth, she had become everything she was meant to be. She was no longer the infertile one, no longer the forgotten prisoner, no longer the broken woman in glass. She was Mama, she was love, she was free. And under the quiet stars of the night, the woman smiled. Not with sorrow, but with joy. Her story had changed. Her tomb had been her prison, but love had become her freedom. And in that freedom, she was truly alive.